Alrighty, tech turbulence unveiling the unsettling wave of layoffs in 2024 by Mahir Yüksel. This is an interesting sort of aggregation of details and information around the tech layoffs that have occurred in 2024. So I wanted to share this and extend some of the information here because I felt like it is interesting and useful information. So let's just dive straight in to this nice amalgamation of tech layoff information for 2024. The article reads, in 2023, the technology sector witnessed a period of uncertainty and change. Even major players in the industry encountered unexpected challenges resulting in inevitable workforce reductions, namely layoffs. One crucial aspect to consider is understanding the broader impact of layoffs, particularly those affecting entry-level positions on workforce dynamics beyond the layoffs initiated by industry giants. Okay? Yep, pretty standard intro here. The primary reasons for layoffs include post-pandemic economic uncertainties, changes in consumer demands and industry needs, companies' restructuring efforts and strategic realignments, and technological advancements reshaping workforce dynamics. And those are the statements most of these companies have been making. It's just a lot of CEO speak, like we've been saying and noticing as we've covered individual companies' layoffs, the CEOs or whoever's making the announcement of the layoff. It's basically echoing exactly what's said here. It's these very business-friendly reasons, and economic uncertainty, I would say, is actually less often cited in these layoff notices that people have been getting so far. So that's kind of an interesting additional piece. I feel like most people see and feel that the economics are a big factor in these layoffs. Anyways, the article continues. These factors underscore the fragility of employment stability in the technology sector. Yes, it is a very fragile moment right now, much like the 2000s dot-com bubble burst. We are shaking off the old SaaS and software services models of business and startup approaches to developing startups and the architecture of the business and the engineering sides of those companies that has dominated the space in tech for the last decade now. Software as services. I think now we are moving into AI as a service, licensed machine learning, and things like that will be the next big block of big companies or standout companies. I think like crypto, blockchain, NFTs, that whole thing sort of had that air to it initially in over the last 4 or 5 years. People thought that was going to be the thing, but as we've really now noticed, the regulatory component to that is the huge limiting factor, and so I think that we will see a lot more AI software as a service or just AI as a service type businesses and business models that get propped up and end up being very successful, because I think the regulatory side will never be able to catch up, just like they've never really been able to catch up to social media and those types of things. So, and I should also mention social media is another big component of the last decade of tech and the tech industry, obviously, not just software services. Between those two, that's a big chunk of the overall landscape of tech in the last decade. So I think we are moving now into a new stage. Anyways, the article continues here. Actually, taking a look at the historical development of layoffs over the past 5 years would provide us with valuable insights into understanding the underlying dynamics of layoffs. So what do we have here? So in April of 2020, we had 26,710 employees, estimated number of tech layoffs monthly. And then that has ramped up since, 2021. It was very flat. I think there was just a lot of hiring as companies were finally figuring out that the lockdowns and the lack of person-to-person physical contact was going to occur for a while. So a lot of these companies, hired up remote workers to help augment some of that through 2021. And then it started to obviously loosen back up. People came back together. And in 2022, you saw a huge wave of layoffs. So yeah, interesting to kind of see the picture of those 3 years aggregated together. So as he says, in 2020, the technology companies, which had experienced robust growth until the early days of the pandemic, felt the initial impacts of the pandemic as a significant disruption due to factors such as high inflation, increased interest rates, uncertainties in foreign exchange, and the strain caused by excessive staffing in recent years. I'll skip the quote here on what the Federal Reserve had to say. Most of the world's largest technology companies had to confront significant realities during the pandemic period. The producer-consumer balance was disrupted because consumers are more than just buyers, they are also social beings. Yep. Consumers interact with their surroundings and try to understand the uncertainties created by their environment and solve the problems they perceive. The pandemic reshaped the physical and digital interactions of consumers and changed everything about human life, including shopping patterns and working conditions. Absolutely. We saw how DoorDash, parking lot pickup services from all the big retailers started to spin up and have continued. I mean, that's kind of a default for us now, honestly. Like, we very rarely go inside Target. Most of it is just pickup orders. Obviously, Amazon had an absolute explosion of growth. Most people basically by default started to use Amazon for most of their shopping needs. So by the time 2023 arrived, giants like Meta, Alphabet, Yahoo, and Amazon carried out extensive layoffs, resulting in the termination of over 240,000 individuals. The largest layoff chain of the post-pandemic era commenced in 2022 with Meta laying off 11,000 employees. Well, this is now pre the Tesla layoffs that I was so fortunate enough to be a part of in the last couple weeks. So that has far exceeded Meta's 2022 numbers, sadly. Meta laid off a total of 13% of its workforce in one go. Alongside this decision, Mark Zuckerberg also released a message stating that all hiring activities would be frozen. Yep, we know that message, but obviously that's continuing to be a thing. A lot of companies are in hiring freezes right now, especially a lot of tech companies. And as more of the big guys do even small layoffs, the mid-size and even small startups are playing super defense right now and not really hiring, but for very key and lucrative roles. Some, I think, are positioned well enough where they see the opportunity that some of these folks getting laid off are a big recruiting opportunity for certain roles. So, I mean, that'll be an advantage for some of the more well-positioned companies who have better revenue and better profit and maybe a bit stronger business model and product market fit and all that. But we'll kind of see. So an article titled "Remembering the Startups We Lost in 2022," written by TechCrunch authors Brian, Kyle, Marianne, and Natasha, serves as an important source of data for layoffs between 2020 and 2022. This is a little bit more specific quarterly data there on the layoffs that we see. In the third quarter of 2022, investors significantly reduced their investment pace as the downturn in public markets extended into the third quarter, also inflation. According to the analysis by Crunchbase News, venture capital funding amounted to $81 billion in the third quarter of 2022, representing a decrease of 53% from the previous year and 33% from the previous quarter. That's huge, a 50% decline in venture capital, which in a lot of cases is accepted to be a loss or accepted to be very risky. And for some, in some cases, right, R&D type budgets for things are a bit of a write-off for these companies, right? So you throw money into some new R&D type thing, there's tax benefits to a company for doing that. It's pretty significant. I didn't realize it was that significant. As far as I knew, the VC money was getting a lot tighter, but 53% decline is pretty. I mean, that's massive. That's huge. Let's see, where are we? Although funding in the last quarter of 2022 slightly increased with the disclosure of undisclosed private funding in the early months of 2023, it is considered a period of the most significant decline in funding compared to previous quarters. Yeah, I fully believe that. Global early stage financing reached $34 billion in the third quarter of 2022, marking a quarter-over-quarter decrease of 25%. Okay, yeah. So generally speaking, we saw a huge shift in venture capital funding. That forced a lot of startups to obviously fail. Global layoffs push many individuals towards the idea of starting their own startups. Each year, over 305 million startups are launched worldwide, but most of them fail to thrive. Factors such as COVID-19 impact the ongoing process, factors such as COVID-19 impact and the ongoing process contribute to the high failure rate of startups, making it challenging for newly established companies to find their place in the market, compete with established competitors, and generate profits. Looking at post-COVID-19, the stats of post-COVID-19, the grim reality for startups is as follows. 9 out of 10 startups fail. 38% of startups fail because they run out of cash. 35% of startups fail because they can't find the right market. 81% of startup owners don't see borrowing for their business as a concern. So, I mean, these are interesting numbers. I won't get all the way through these. It's not super important to the general point here. 9 out of 10 startups fail. I don't know that that's novel. I think the number, that's like probably generally the reality even when there's plenty of VC money floating around, companies just fail to find product market fit, or you just have an over exuberant entrepreneur, founder, co-founder, who just gauges things very poorly and cannot find product market fit. But it's the overwhelming minority of startups that end up making it big. So failing startups are part of a project related to the large-scale layoffs by global giants and the multitude of people left unemployed. At the onset of the pandemic, entrepreneur Roger Lee launched a website called Layoffs.fyi. That's a good website. I use it sometimes. Which is an electronic catalog featuring approximately 450,000 companies. According to Nick Bloom, an economics professor at Stanford, if you have government data on the state of technology, you don't need a site like Roger Lee's. However, if such data is not available, Layoffs FYI becomes very valuable. Yeah, that's true. So, the government doesn't explicitly track the tech industry. Obviously, they have more general statistics around layoffs, or, they have the WARN notification systems now, which help to get somewhat of a bigger picture of layoffs occurring across the country. Yeah, no government publishes stats on layoffs that occur within companies in their own country. Such data leads to significant prestige loss for both the sector and the industry, as well as for governments. Therefore, the value of Roger Lee's work is immense. Touting layoffs.fyi here. It is a good site if you care to track the bigger picture of layoffs and see some kind of deeper metrics and data around that. But I won't dive too much into that here. You can look at that site for yourself. Tech Layoffs 2022 to 2024. So yeah, again, this article was written on April 8th. So we didn't get the big Tesla block, which would have altered this April number here quite a bit. It doesn't look like the article has been edited to take that into account. So tech layoffs by industry. So this is interesting here. Retail, and this is broken up by year. Retail getting hammered the worst, which is, not a surprise, but technology retail. We know that Amazon eliminated a bunch of their retail technology groups, the ones that are responsible for some of the automated in-store systems that they were using. That dominated 2022, 23, and 24 now. I guess it looks like hardware in 2024 is the larger group, but I'm kind of curious. They have transportation. Again, that would be a lot higher. That might even be right up there with hardware. Given the Tesla layoff, that would probably fall under the transportation category compared to hardware category, I would assume. But then also that's a good point. How do you bucket things when you have a company like Tesla that's in multiple domains? They're in hardware, they're in transportation, they're in data. How do you necessarily take that all into account? I guess you can't really do that. I guess you just got to pick the closest one. So what are the reasons behind the layoffs? We all want to know. There are multiple factors contributing to layoffs, particularly in tech. There are numerous factors at play, explains Jeff Schulman, a professor at the University of Washington's Foster School of Business, who closely monitors the tech sector. Layoffs drive up stock prices. Therefore, these companies conduct layoffs to boost their stock value. Not always the case. Going back to Tesla, we saw Tesla's stock actually get depleted, and then right after that layoff, they had their earnings call. Stock kind of came back. I don't know where it's at today, actually, but let's look real quick. Where is it? Oh, okay, so they're well back up now, actually. Yeah, so over the last week. So that was the layoff right here. Where was it? It was the 15th was when the first round of layoffs occurred. They had a pretty sharp decline all the way through the week there, but they are coming back strong. Still not back to a 6-month high, but they might get back there. So yeah, generally speaking, though, whenever layoffs occur, stock goes up. That's what investors like to see, because at the end of the day, that directly contributes to the bottom line. That is revenue being recaptured immediately. It's as good as adding a product or a service that is highly profitable. It's that simple. Unfortunately, they don't really care about the macro impacts. It doesn't get factored into investment decisions like that. Believe I've mentioned before, but there is a strategy around at the top levels of companies, especially tech companies, since there's a lot of M&A that occurs and a lot of strategy around getting your company sold or acquired by a bigger company and exiting. That's, a big part of the tech industry and the startup world. There very much is an approach that's taken where if you want your company, if you're potentially being considered to be acquired, or you're trying to get acquired and you're kind of close to maybe making a deal with somebody to buy your company, some tech companies will do layoffs, even if their business is super strong, because it just helps that much more. It helps their bottom line look that much better. So when they go into the due diligence process with the acquiring company, they look that much better. And so there are situations where a company could be doing really well, business-wise, profit-wise, and still conduct a layoff in order to look more attractive and make a better deal with an acquiring company, and therefore get a stronger exit. It sucks. I think it's garbage. It's a garbage way to do something, but it is what it is. So yeah, layoffs drive up stock prices, and these companies conduct layoffs to boost their stock value. That is generally true. So as we see here between Google, Amazon, you see after layoffs that occurred, stock prices are great. When startups, especially with startups or small to medium-sized tech ventures struggling to generate resources due to cash flow issues and the end of an era of easy money, it is believed that they face difficulty in sourcing funds, leading to workforce reductions. However, experts suggest that recent layoffs in many large and publicly traded companies, traded tech companies, aim to appease investors, which is interesting. Another reason for imitative layoffs is highlighted by Jeffrey Pfeffer. When executives see their counterparts in other companies conducting layoffs, they often follow the same path like robots. Yeah, totally. Everyone just follows the big guys because they're just assuming they have better insights and better data that they're actioning off of, better connections, better network, all of that. And so if they're doing it, then there's probably good reason to follow suit. This practice, dubbed imitative layoffs by Stanford University professor Jeffrey Pfeffer, explains the majority of mass layoffs that plagued the tech and media sector in 2022 and 2023. Makes sense. So are the layoffs an indication of a declining economy for the U.S.? In fact, this is one of the most important questions that need to be addressed. Everyone is seeking answers regarding how companies, the ecosystem, and the economy are being affected. In a detailed study conducted by Sandra and Marilyn Westner from the Harvard Business Review in 2022, various dimensions of these impacts are discussed. So they had in this article, research has long shown that layoffs have a detrimental effect on both individuals and corporate performance. The short-term cost savings provided by layoffs often result in poor reputation, loss of knowledge, weakened loyalty, and decreased innovation. Absolutely. All of which are not profitable in the long run. In the current economic turmoil, leaders need to understand what is different in today's broad social landscape in order to make smart and humane staffing decisions. Yeah, there's an interesting, I forget who did it now, but there was this interesting sort of expose. I honestly think it was on like the John Oliver show, which I don't typically watch, but this bit that he did on McKinsey, the consulting company, who has been around for a very long time. They're like the number one consulting company in the world. But like they wrote a lot of the ideological material around like management. And I think it was like even the founder of that consulting firm basically created the like executive benefits ethos and this like even like the concept of like the golden parachute for very senior leaders, right? When their companies go under or they get laid off or whatever, basically they're completely fine. Really they in most cases could be fine for life and never have to go back to work. But he basically coined the ideas around executives should be getting paid very, very, very well, which don't disagree with. I think, the way the free market is the way that it is. And, things should be based on merit across the board. If you do a really good job and you happen to be in charge of the company, you have all the liability. And if you're doing a good job, you should get compensated well for that. I do think things like intentionally getting rid of people and laying people off and ruining people's lives that work for you and do a good job for you just for something like a merger, to make a merger better and to make your exit as a co-founder, founder, or CEO even stronger is super messed up and unethical. But, these are the ways of the world. I think this is a good point, though, that there is long-term damage ultimately that gets done if you have mass layoff after mass layoff every few years, because you keep hiring people, giving them that perspective that your company's doing great and business is going well. So you're going to hire a bunch of people. Their expertise, their skill set is in demand in your company, only to just go, actually, no, we're just going to wipe all of that out because we weren't paying attention the whole time, or we don't generally pay attention. All we care about is just our product and getting our product built and sold. And all of the business ops decisions made in between are not managed, and you just make big cuts. I think you do actually create potentially a very poor reputation for your company. Because I mean, think about it. If you're doing 10% layoffs every 5 or 6 years, seems to be the trend for some of these bigger companies, at least now, lately. Maybe not in the longer term past, but lately that has been a trend for some of these companies are doing double-digit percentage layoffs on a recurring basis. That's in some cases literally tens of thousands of people. That's a lot of people. Imagine if Amazon, who has laid off, well, actually, I'll just say Tesla, because Tesla now has laid off since 2022, has laid off somewhere around like 40,000. Imagine if you had one city where all of those people lived, and that was just like an old mining town, or an old like factory town, where basically everyone in the town worked for the one mine or the one big company, big factory, big plant, whatever. Imagine a town of 50,000, 40,000 people. That's a good sized town, right? That's a large population. And imagine all of them being jobless. And imagine the negative press that would very quickly disseminate out, from that place where literally nobody had a job. So I get it. It's highly siloed when you have a global workforce and you have small cuts made in all these different geos all over the place. It's a little bit different, but over time, in a very real way, damage your reputation. Because word of mouth is huge. And that was one thing I remember learning in business school when I did my undergraduate, was when it comes to marketing and essentially, getting a brand out there, getting product details out there into the public, word of mouth is the number one most powerful thing, right? When you're chatting with your friends and somebody says, hey, I tried this thing, it was super cool, you should try it. That's way more powerful than a freaking banner ad on a website. And likewise, if somebody says, hey, I tried this thing over here and it sucks, or, oh yeah, I used to work at that company and they treated me terribly and then they fired us all, that means a lot, right, in people's circles. So if you compound that out across tens of thousands of people, you very likely have some long-term damage that you may never be able to recover from. So that's my take on it. I could be totally wrong at the end of the day. It may not do anything. A company could be incredibly well positioned and have very strong products and services that supersede all of those one-off negative things that any one person may have to say. So research indicates that being laid off ranks 7th among the most stressful life experiences, following a divorce, sudden and severe hearing or vision impairment, or the death of a close friend. Okay. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. Those things would actually be much more terrible things to have to contend with. Experts note that overcoming the psychological trauma caused by job loss typically takes an average of 2 years. It's interesting. For healthy employees without pre-existing health issues, the likelihood of developing a new health problem within the first 15 to 18 months after being laid off increases by 83%. Wow, that's crazy. The most common illnesses being stress-related conditions such as hypertension, heart disease, and arthritis. It is assessed that the psychological and financial pressure caused by layoffs could increase the risk of suicide by 1.3 to 3 times. Yeah, there's that famous line in The Big Short, right? In the movie, was it Brad Pitt's character? He's talking to the guys that he's working with, and they're getting all excited because they're realizing that they're correct about the housing market crash that's about to happen. He confronts them about it, right? And basically tells them not to be happy and excited because whatever it was, with every 1 point of unemployment going up, the suicide rate goes up 10% or something like that. So I forget, I'm probably wrong on those numbers, but yeah, it's a very, very sad thing. And especially if you have a lot of financial obligations tied to that. It's really unfortunate, and yeah, sad to see that we're kind of moving into another season of this type of stuff, unfortunately. The risk of depression doubles for laid off employees, while the risk of substance abuse quadruples, and the risk of engaging in violent acts, including spousal and child abuse, increases 6-fold. That's awful. The stress resulting from layoffs is also considered to potentially adversely affect the development of the fetus in pregnant women. That's horrible. Okay. Well, let's end that on a very low note there. So all of the damaging and horrible effects of layoffs. We all know it, but it's sad to see the actual stats and numbers around it. Another study is an investigation into the financial impacts of downsizing in Fortune 1000 companies over a 5-year period characterized by continuous economic growth. Key financial metrics such as asset profitability, profit margin, earnings per share, revenue growth, and market value were measured annually between 2003 and 2007. Repeating previous longitudinal studies, this research demonstrated that layoffs did not generally result in immediate financial improvement. That's interesting. Wake-up call. Companies that conducted layoffs exhibited lower performance than those that did not for the first 2 years, achieving comparable performance in asset returns, profit margins, and economic growth indicators in the third year. The authors concluded the competitive advantage for downsizing firms to outperform their rivals takes longer to materialize. It's a double-edged sword. You see trouble on the horizon for your business, for your bottom line. What can you do? The easiest thing to do is to lay people off. That's a very quick and immediate recapture of lots and lots of money. That's the easiest thing to do. So if you see trouble on the horizon, you do layoffs, right? That's a quick and easy thing to do. I think it's way easier to write off the long-term effects of it. I think there is something, if you are numb to the frequency of large layoffs, like if you're doing them every few years, even every 5 years, I think you are still very potentially creating tremendous damage for your brand and your company over time. If that's just like your methodology is, just hire who we need to hire. We pay no attention to it. And then every 5 years, we just finally reach a moment of, we're going to have a down year or a down few quarters. Let's just fire a bunch of the people we just hired. I don't think that's a intelligent way to go about. And I mean, at the same time, you got to hire people. You get to a certain size, you're just relying on, really in a lot of cases, hundreds and even maybe thousands of mid-level and frontline management to basically make hiring decisions. The senior leadership get fully abstracted out of the picture of hiring at a point. I wanted to share that article. I felt like it was a pretty interesting encapsulation of everything so far this year with some data around it, and a little bit of the sad and unfortunate reality of layoffs and the negative effects that inevitably occur inside of society. Thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe it, share it if you feel so inclined, and we'll see you next time.